Hi, in this video we're going to be looking at the digestive system. So exercise 38. So looking at the overview of the digestive system, this is figure 38.1 as well as what we see on figure 38.7 as well as what we see in figure 38.10 and 38.15. So again, our model is going to encompass several different illustrations. Before we get pointing through, starting at the beginning of figure 38.1, pretty straightforward. It shows you kind of the overview of the digestive system. 38.2 shows you a cross section. This has half of the information on it. The other half of the information is on figure 38.8. But looking at 38.2, on the free edge, you do not have to know the glands of the submucosa. Underneath the mucosa, you don't have to know the epithelium or the lamina propria. Under the serosa, you just have to know serosa. I'm not going to point to the parts of the serosa. I might ask you what epithelium serosa is made out of, but I won't point to it on the model. You do not have to know the mucus-associated lymphoid tissue. You do not have to know the duct, the gland outside of the alimentary canal. You don't have to know the gland in the mucosa. You do not have to know the artery, the nerve, the vein, or the lymphatic vessel. 38.3, ignore, don't look at it. 38.4, again, shows you half a head. I've already shown you that in the respiratory videos, so I'm not going to show it again. It's the exact same model, so just study that twice, so to speak. Typically, I would draw a tongue on the board and label it, but I found a picture. So I know we're going to use a picture. It's going to be different. So we'll see that in a moment. Figure 38.5, you can ignore picture B, C, and D. So we're just looking at picture A. And again, I'll point to all these in just a moment. With the pyloric region, you don't have to know pyloric canal or the pyloric antrum. We're just going to call that the pyloric region. So when we see fundus, body, cardiac, and pyloric, we do have to have of the stomach because again, if I just say fundus, lots of organs have fundus. Cardia, you might think it's the heart. So it's the cardiac region of the stomach, the fundic region of the stomach, the body region of the stomach, or the pyloric region of the stomach. Now you will have to know the functions of the chief and parietal cells. So on page 573, they're in bold-faced words, so those would be a word question. Figure 38.6, ignore. We don't do slides anymore. 38.7, you can ignore picture A. That's a dead guy. Picture C would be a word question. So I could ask you, what does the lesser omentum attach to? What attaches to the large intestine, small intestine, so forth. Picture B is, again, we're kind of combining it with figure 31 or 38.1, so it'll be on this model. Figure 38.8 shows you the cross-section of small intestines. I will show you this model in just a minute. But looking at the picture, you can ignore picture D, picture C. Picture A shows you where it's coming from. And again, we're combining this with information we got from 38.2. On picture B, you can ignore the enterocytes, absorptive cells. Ignore the goblet. You don't have to know the mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue. You don't have to know the intestinal crypt. You do not have to know the duodenal gland. And on the other side of the picture, you do not have to know the enteroendocrine cells. 38.9, completely ignore. 38.10, again, I will show you all these structures on the model in front of you. You do not have to know the right colic flexure or the left colic flexure. You can ignore those two. That just means turn right, essentially. And you don't have to know the epiploic appendages. 38.11, we do have teeth, so you'll need to be able to identify the teeth as well as parts of the teeth. 38.12. You do need to know the adult dental formula for lab lecture. You have to know kids and adults, but for lab, we're just going to do adults, and that's in the reading right there on that page. I'm not going to make you know when they come in because they could vary greatly on that one. On 38.12, you don't have to know the apical foramen. That's at the bottom. You do not have to know the periodontal ligament. Your book just says cement. Put a UM at the end of that. The professional term is cementum. Where it has pulp cavity, that's usually referred to as root pulp cavity. So the cavity is the hole or space in the tooth. The actual root pulp are the living tissues, the blood vessels and the nerves and so forth. So I will make you know the difference between root pulp and root pulp cavity. You can ignore the dentil tubules. And dentine is also calcified. So we always think of enamel because it's the hardest surface in the body and it has tons and tons of calcium. Dentine also has calcium. It's not as much as the enamel, so it's softer than the enamel, but it is also calcified. So we will show models of those. 38.13, completely ignore. 38.14 is the liver. Picture A, you do not have to know the bare area, but everybody else you get to know. Picture B, on the back side, you do not have to know the sulcus for the inferior vena cava. You do not have to know the bare area. You do not have to know the hepatic vein. You do not have to know the porta hepaticus. Now, the human vein has 4 lobes, the right lobe, the left lobe, the caudate lobe, and the quadrate lobe. I will not point to the caudate or the quadrate. I will only point to the left or right lobe, but you still have to know that they have 4 lobes. 38.5, again, I will show you that briefly on this picture. That's how the pancreas and the liver dump into the duodenum. On this lobe and the quadrate lobe, I will not point to the caudate or the quadrate. Now, for the inferior vena cava, you do not have to know the bare area. You do not have to know the hepatic vein. You do not have to know the porta hepaticus. Now, the human vein has 4 lobes, the right lobe, the left lobe, the caudate lobe, and the quadrate lobe. I will not point to the caudate or the quadrate. I will only point to the left or right lobe, but you still have to know that they have 4 lobes. 38.5, again, I will show you that briefly on this picture. That's how the pancreas and the liver dump into the duodenum. On this page, you do not have to know the mucosal folds. You do not have to know the major duodenal papilla. On the free edge of 38.15, you do not have to know the accessory pancreatic duct. And with the main pancreatic duct, you don't have to know the sphincter part. Now, the hepatopancreatic ampulla is sometimes called the ampulla of Vader, like Darth Vader, but with a T. And the hepatopancreatic sphincter is sometimes called the sphincter of Oddi. At the end of the slideshow, I will spell those out for you. On figure 38.16, you can completely ignore. So we're just going to go through the models and point to all the structures. So this is the digestive system together. So we have the esophagus coming in. We have the stomach. This is the lesser curvature of the stomach. This is the greater curvature of the stomach. We have the cardiac region of the stomach, the fundic region of the stomach, the body region of the stomach, and the pyloric region of the stomach. We have the liver. We're going to have the right lobe of the liver and the left lobe of the liver. Over here, we're going to have the round ligament towards the top. Hanging off the bottom would be, towards the top is the falciform ligament. Hanging off the bottom is the round ligament. That's what I get for looking at my picture and talking at the same time. Here we have the gallbladder. We have the cystic duct coming from the gallbladder, the hepatic duct coming from the liver. They're going to join the common bile duct. We have the spleen. We have the pancreas. We'll get to more detail with that in a moment. And we have the duodenum, and we can see the plica circularis, or the circular folds of the duodenum. We have the jejunum and the ileum. Here's our ileocecal valve, how material goes from the ileum to the cecum. This is the cecum. Here's the appendix. This is the ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon. Snaking back behind here is the sigmoid colon, makes it S shape. Here is the rectum and the anus. When we look at this gray band here, that is a muscle called the tene coli. It means to tense the colon. It makes the bubbles or the haustra of the large intestines that basically house little chambers for bacteria to hang out.
that all? Oh.
Same model, I've just removed part so we can see the internal structure. So again, the esophagus, the cardiac region of the stomach, fundic region of the stomach, body region of the stomach, pyloric region of the stomach. Right here is the cardiac sphincter, or the lower esophageal sphincter. This is the pyloric sphincter. All the wrinkles are known as rugae. Then again, lesser curvature, greater curvature. We have the duodenum with the circular folds, or the plica circularis. So again, the cystic duct and the hepatic duct join to form the common bile duct. Okay, here's our pancreas. The tail of the pancreas by the spleen, the head of the pancreas. Here's our pancreatic duct. Pancreatic duct and the common bile duct form the hepatopancreatic ampulla, or the ampulla of Vater. It makes almost a V shape for Vater. And the opening is the hepatopancreatic sphincter, or the sphincter of Oddi, dumping into the duodenum. Again, we have the jejunum and the ileum, and all these structures are the same. I just removed this part so we can see the parts of the pancreas and the stomach. This is that cross section of the small intestine. So it's a combination of figure 38.2 and 38.8. So our regions, we're going to have the mucosal region. So the mucosal layer. Then we have the submucosal layer, the muscularis externa, or you do have to have externa on there because there's another muscle layer, and the serosa down here. So within the mucosa, we're going to have villi, okay, these little finger-like projections. So again, labeled on 38.8. We're going to have our capillary beds and the lacteals. This is the muscularis mucosa. This is going to give us little shimmies. So if there's a piece of food stuck here, this guy will contract to move the food off of that one or two cells. Within the submucosal layer, again, we have the bigger arterioles and venules and capillary beds and lacteals. And you're going to have this. This is the submucosal plexus. This is the plexus that controls the muscularis mucosae. Within the muscularis externa, we have the circular layer and the longitudinal layer, so they can contract in different directions to squeeze and lengthen the organ. And in between the circular layer and the longitudinal layer, we're going to have the myenteric plexus. The myenteric plexus coordinates the movement of the muscularis externa. So if your tummy is rumbly, it's this guy telling it to do so. And this is still the serosa. So here we have our of them, and in between the circular layer and the longitudinal layer, we're going to have the myenteric plexus. The myenteric plexus coordinates the movement of the muscularis externa. So if your tummy is rumbly, it's this guy telling it to do so. And this is still the serosa. Myenteric plexus coordinates the movement, or within the muscularis externa, we have the circular layer and the longitudinal layer, so they can contract in different directions to squeeze and lengthen the organ. And in between the circular layer and the longitudinal layer, we're going to have the myenteric plexus. The myenteric plexus coordinates the movement of the muscularis. So here we have our different teeth. So figures 38.11 and 38.12. These are incisors. They're going to have flat tops. Okay, so that's how we know it's an incisor. This is a canine. They have a pointed top on them. In areas of the tooth, we are going to have the enamel on the outside. Everything up here is known as the crown. The neck is the boundary between the top and the bottom of the tooth. And then we have the root of the tooth. This is a premolar. Sometimes they're called bicuspids because they have two humps on top. Here's a molar. They're the big boys. They have multiple humps on top. And depending on where they are, they'll have three to four different roots. So again, we've got the crown, the neck, and the root. Opening the tooth up, figure 38.2. So again, we've got the crown, we've got the neck, we've got the root, we've got the enamel, and the dentine, which is also calcified. Right here is where we would have the cementum, the glue that holds the tooth in place. Here we have the root pulp cavity and the root pulp, the living tissue in the space. Here is the root canal. Okay, so if you go get a root canal, they actually drill in to kill the. So again, we bicuspids because they have two humps on top. Here's a molar. They're the big boys. They have multiple. The enamel and the dentine, which is also calcified. Right here is where we would have the cementum, the glue that holds the tooth in place. Here we have the root pulp cavity and the root pulp, the living tissue in the space. Here is the root canal. Okay, so if you go get a root canal, they actually drill in to kill or plug the root canal. That way your tooth doesn't hurt anymore, the infection doesn't spread. This is the inside of the jaw. So we have the submandibular gland and the submandibular duct. So very big ducts. This is the guy that allows you to gleek on people or spit on people. This is the sublingual gland and lots of little sublingual ducts. So again, the submandibular only has one duct on either side. The sublingual have them all underneath the tongue. And again, I'm saying duct like air duct, not like quack quacks. Okay. Here's that picture of the tongue I told you about that instead of drawing it on the board, I just went and got you a professional picture. You're welcome. So again, what we have on the tongue, we're going to have our filiform papilla. Our filiform papilla are there for friction. They don't have any taste buds, and so they just allow you to grab stuff with your tongue. And those filiform papilla are kind of whitish in color when you look on your tongue. The fungiform papilla are bigger. They look like little mushrooms, so they're the bigger dots. They're going to have taste buds. And then we have the circumvallate papilla, those really big guys that make a V at the back. They have tons and tons, hundreds of taste buds. The areas of taste, the tip of the tongue, again, is where we're going to find our sweet. The sides of the tongue are where we find salty. Sour is kind of midway up here, and bitter is all along here. Those circumvallate papillae really pick up the bitters. That's why when you swallow a pill, it gets really bitter afterwards because you've passed those big guys there. In the middle of the tongue, you'll have some taste buds, but not as many. Most of the taste buds are going to be focused around the outer edges of the tongue and the back of the tongue. So again, you can taste things just by touching your tongue to it. You don't have to full-on lick something to taste it. Here is the liver. So the liver, again, is figure 38.14. So we can see the right lobe of the liver and the left lobe of the liver. We'll have the falciform ligament up here and the round ligament underneath. When we flipped it over, right lobe of the liver, left lobe of the liver, we can still see the round ligament here. We have the gallbladder, we have the cystic duct, the hepatic duct join the common bile duct. Again, we can see that on figure 38.5 as well. So here's stuff that I would have written on the board. So if you throw up, you don't call it food anymore because you do. So if it's on your plate, it's food. Once you put it in your mouth and you chew it up, then it's called a bolus. Once it gets to your stomach and we add a lot of gastric secretions to it, it becomes chyme. So chyme in your stomach, chyme in your small intestines, and in the large intestines where we absorb a lot of fluid, it becomes fecal matter. These guys, again, I've said as we've gone through, the hepatic duct plus the cystic duct, so the liver and the gallbladder ducts join to form the common bile duct. The hepatopancreatic ampulla is the same as the ampulla of Vater. You can use either one. And the hepatic pancreatic sphincter is the same as sphincter of Oddi. You can use either one. Now the faucets, that is the opening from the mouth to the oral pharynx. So it's kind of like walking through a doorway from the hall into your bedroom. That door frame would be the faucets coming from the mouth into the oral pharynx. And that is the stuff for the digestive system activities.